The warning that started it all in a thing. Karen loved more than controlling the HOA, it was controlling me. Well, at least she thought she could. I had lived in this neighborhood for 2 years, and I had already seen her terrorize nearly everyone. Petty fines, ridiculous complaints, and threats of legal action over the smallest infractions. But up until now, I had managed to fly under her radar. That was until the parking incident. It was a Saturday morning. I had just washed my car, a sleek black Mustang that I took way too much pride in, and parked it in my own driveway. My own driveway. The audacity, right? Apparently, in Karen's twisted HOA rulebook, my car was an eyesore and a violation of community aesthetics. I didn't know about this until I found a bright yellow warning notice taped aggressively to my windshield. Dear homeowner, your vehicle is in direct violation of Section 14.3b of the HOA parking guidelines. Vehicles must be in garages or parked in HOA designated areas only. Failure to comply will result in towing at the owner's expense. Consider this your final warning. HOA President Karen. I stared at the paper, utterly dumbfounded. First of all, what kind of nonsense rule was that? Second, Karen didn't own this neighborhood, at least not legally. Third, if she thought I was about to let her push me around, she had another thing coming. I crumpled the notice and tossed it in the trash. Surely that would be the end of it. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The next morning, I found another warning taped to my door. Same nonsense. But this time, it included an extra little note in red marker. Move it or lose it. Oh, so we were making threats now? I glanced down the street and sure enough, there she was. Karen in her bathrobe, glaring at me from her porch, clutching her clipboard like it was the Ten Commandments. She even had her phone out, probably taking evidence photos. I smiled, waved at her, and slammed my door shut. Let the games begin. By noon, I had already done my research. As it turns out, Karen didn't actually have the legal right to tow anything. The HOA's guidelines were full of vague, unenforceable nonsense. In fact, my neighbor Greg, who had been here for over a decade, told me that Karen had been threatening to tow cars for years, but had never actually followed through. That's when I had an idea. A beautiful, glorious idea. If Karen wanted a towing war, she was going to get one. But first, I needed to set the bait. That night, I moved my car a few inches closer to the street, just enough to make it look like it was technically out of my driveway. I knew Karen wouldn't be able to resist. And just as I predicted, the next morning I heard the distant roar of a tow truck pulling into the neighborhood. Karen had finally made her move. She had no idea what was coming next. The moment I heard the tow truck's rumbling engine, I knew my plan was working. I peeked through my blinds, and sure enough, there she was, Karen, marching down my driveway with the confidence of a dictator inspecting her troops. Clipboard in hand, phone at the ready, and that smug little smirk on her face. Behind her, the tow truck driver, a burly, bored-looking guy in grease-stained overalls, stepped out of his truck, already shaking his head. Yeah, this the one? He asked, pointing at my Mustang. Karen nodded enthusiastically. Yep, this car is in violation of HOA regulations and needs to be removed immediately. I could almost feel the excitement radiating off of her. She was finally doing it, finally proving she had supreme HOA power. Too bad for her, I had already called the police. See, here's the thing. Karen had no actual authority to tow my car. She wasn't a government official, she wasn't law enforcement, she wasn't even a property manager, just a power-hungry busybody who thought her title meant she could do whatever she wanted. And that's where she made a fatal mistake. As soon as the tow truck driver started hooking up my Mustang, two things happened at once. One, I stepped outside, holding my phone high in the air, already recording. Two, a police car rolled up to the curb, lights flashing. Karen's smug grin disappeared instantly. Officer Mitchell, a cop I'd chatted before at the local coffee shop, stepped out of the car, adjusting his belt. He took one look at the situation and sighed. All right, what's going on here? I played it cool. Morning, officer. Looks like someone's trying to steal my car. Karen gasped. Excuse me? This car is illegally parked. The tow truck driver, clearly not wanting to be in the middle of whatever this was, held up his hands. Lady, you said you had the authority to tow it. Do you even own this property? I am the HOA president, Karen barked, her face turning a lovely shade of tomato red. That gives me full authority to... No, it doesn't. Officer Mitchell cut in, shaking his head. HOAs can fine homeowners for violations, but they don't have the legal right to tow vehicles from private driveways. That would be trespassing and theft. Karen's mouth flapped open and closed like a fish. But, but it's an eyesore. It ruins the community aesthetics. Mitchell gave her a look. That's not a crime, ma'am. And then, just when I thought this couldn't get any better, the tow truck driver, who was now realizing Karen had wasted his time, unceremoniously unhooked my Mustang and turned to her. Yeah, you're going to have to pay the service fee, he said, arms crossed. Karen paled. What? But I called you to tow it. Yeah, and I still drove out here. That costs money. He pulled out a clipboard and handed her a bill. $200. Cash or card? I swear, I have never seen someone's soul leave their body so fast. Karen sputtered, looking from me to the cop to the tow truck driver, realizing she had played herself. I couldn't help but smile. You know, Karen, maybe next time you should read up on the actual laws before trying to tow someone's car. She shot me a glare that could have melted steel, but she had no choice. With shaky hands, she pulled out her credit card and paid the driver. The moment he got back in his truck and pulled away, Karen turned back to Officer Mitchell. You need to fine him, arrest him, do something. Mitchell sighed. For what? Parking in his own driveway? Karen stomped her foot, let out a frustrated shriek, and stormed off. I waved after her. See you at the next HOA meeting, Karen. She didn't answer, but something told me this wasn't over yet. Karen might have lost the battle, but she sure as hell wasn't ready to lose the war. The very next morning, I woke up to find yet another bright yellow HOA warning taped to my front door. Violation notice, failure to maintain community standards. Your property has been flagged for multiple infractions, including but not limited to parking violations, unapproved exterior modifications, noise disturbances, general lack of compliance with HOA guidelines. Seriously? Failure to address these violations within 24 hours will result in a formal hearing and potential fines. I snorted. A formal hearing? Oh, Karen was desperate now. As I stepped outside, I saw her standing across the street, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk. The second she realized I'd seen her, she turned and stomped back inside. Oh, it was on. I needed to send a message, one that would make it clear she was messing with the wrong homeowner. The perfect counterattack. Instead of backing down, I did the exact opposite. I printed out 50 copies of the bogus violation notice. But this time I changed the name at the bottom. Instead of mine, they all read, Karen Thompson, HO President. Violations include unauthorized landscaping decisions, abuse of HOA power, general unpleasantness, attempted vehicle theft. And then I taped one to every single mailbox in the neighborhood. By noon, everyone was talking about it. Greg, my neighbor, nearly doubled over laughing when he saw his, dude, this is the best thing I've ever seen. She's going to lose her mind. And lose her mind she did. I was back in my house when I heard a furious shriek from across the street. Then came the stomping. Boom, boom, boom. Karen pounded on my front door like she was serving a federal warrant. I casually sipped my coffee before opening it. Karen, to what do I owe the pleasure? She shoved one of my fake violation notices in my face, her hands shaking. What the hell is this? I blinked innocently. Oh, you mean the community announcement? Thought everyone should be aware of some major violations happening around here. Her face turned a delightful shade of volcanic red. You think this is funny? I smirked. Oh, absolutely. She threw the paper down and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Then she leaned in close. You have no idea who you're messing with. That's when I knew. Karen had a plan B, and whatever it was, she thought it was going to take me down for good. The HOA meeting showdown. Karen wasted no time setting up a mandatory emergency HOA meeting for that evening. Her plan? To officially fine me into oblivion. My plan? To completely ruin her night. The second I walked into the community clubhouse, I could already tell she'd stacked the deck. She had a PowerPoint set up, a thick folder of evidence in front of her, and a few of her cronies seated at the board table, nodding along to everything she said. The moment I sat down, Karen smirked. Oh, she thought she had me. Before we begin, she said sweetly, I'd like to introduce today's primary agenda item, Mr. My Name's repeated HOA violations and his refusal to comply with our regulations. She clicked the first slide on her PowerPoint, a full-screen image of my Mustang. "This is what's destroying the neighborhood," she declared dramatically. Some people in the audience murmured, but I could tell most of them were already sick of her nonsense. "Karen," I said, leaning back, "just admit it. You're mad because I made you pay for a tow truck you didn't need." Her jaw tightened. "That is not the issue here," I grinned. "Then let's talk about the real issue." With that, I pulled out a thick manila folder of my own. See, while Karen was busy planning her revenge, I had been doing some research. And what I found? Oh, it was beautiful. I stood up, walked over to the projector, and clicked over to my own PowerPoint. Slide 1, Karen's HOA spending report. I turned to the audience. Fun fact, did you guys know our HOA fees have been going up every year? Murmurs of agreement. I clicked to slide 2, an official record of Karen's recent business expenses. Turns out, Karen here has been using HOA funds to cover personal expenses, like that nice new patio set she got last month. The murmurs turned into gasps. Karen went pale. That's not true. That was. Slide 3, a receipt with her name on it, listing HOA discretionary funds as payment. The room went dead silent. I leaned in. "Karen, did you really think I wouldn't dig into your little empire after you tried to tow my car?" Her eyes darted around. "This meeting is over," she screeched. But then Greg stood up. "Nah, I think we should vote. Who thinks Karen should be removed as HOA president?" Hands shot up. Karen's face twisted in horror. "You can't do this." But oh, we absolutely could. And we did. As of that moment, Karen was no longer HOA president. But I wasn't done yet, because Karen still had one last nasty trick up her sleeve. Karen's downfall at the HOA meeting was spectacular. One minute, she was queen of the neighborhood, ruling with an iron fist and a clipboard. The next, she was just another bitter homeowner, left standing in the middle of the clubhouse, watching her power slip through her fingers like a cheap bottle of white wine. I should have been satisfied. But something told me Karen wasn't done. And I was right. The final act of desperation. The morning after the meeting, I was enjoying my coffee when I heard a metallic clanking from outside. I peeked through my window and, oh, you've got to be kidding me. There, standing proudly on my driveway, was Karen. And behind her, a fresh, brand new, no parking sign drilled directly into the pavement. Oh, she wasn't even pretending anymore. She had gone full villain. I threw open the door. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She turned to me with the smuggest grin I had ever seen. "Oh, didn't you hear? The HOA board may have voted me out, but as a homeowner, I still have the right to submit new parking regulations for consideration." I blinked. "You submitted a regulation in the middle of the night?" "Why, yes," she said, fake innocence dripping from her voice. "And wouldn't you know it? The committee approved an immediate parking restriction right in front of your house." I looked at the sign. "No parking, towing enforced." This woman was insane. Karen folded her arms. "If I were you, I'd move that little car of yours before I call the city and have it towed for real this time." Oh, this was war. Karen finally gets what she deserves. I wasn't even mad. I was excited, because what Karen didn't know was that I had already done some digging into her past. And guess what I found? Karen had several unpaid parking tickets from a neighboring city, ones that she had never taken care of. And because of that, her driver's license was suspended. That's right. Karen, the self-proclaimed parking enforcer of the neighborhood, wasn't even legally allowed to drive. Oh, the irony. So while she was busy gloating, I pulled out my phone and dialed. "Who are you calling?" she snapped. "Just a friend," I said sweetly. And by friend, I meant a local parking enforcement officer. 15 minutes later, a city officer pulled up. Karen, still blissfully unaware, smiled, probably thinking I was about to get fined or towed. Instead, the officer walked right past me and straight to her. "Ma'am, are you the owner of that white BMW parked illegally over there?" he asked, pointing at her car, which, by the way, was directly in front of a fire hydrant. Karen's face dropped. "What? That's not why you're here." The officer ignored her. "License and registration, please." I folded my arms, grinning. "You might want to tell him about that little issue with your license, Karen." Her face went from red to ghost white. "Ma'am," the officer said, "are you currently licensed to drive?" "Aye," she stammered. The officer wasn't playing around. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." And just like that, Karen got slapped with a hefty fine, an official citation, and the best part, her car got towed. I don't think I've ever enjoyed a moment so much in my life. As the tow truck lifted her BMW onto its platform, Karen lost it. "This isn't fair. He's the one who needs to be towed," she screamed, pointing at me like some deranged courtroom drama villain. The officer looked at me, then at my car, parked safely in my driveway. He shrugged. "No violations here." Then Karen shrieked. I leaned in, voice dripping with satisfaction. "Oh, Karen, maybe next time you should check your own record before coming after mine." She stormed off, humiliated, furious, and completely powerless. And as her car disappeared down the street, I knew her reign of terror was finally over, or so I thought, because there was one last twist waiting for her. Karen's car getting towed should have been the end of it. Any sane person would have taken the L and moved on. But Karen? Oh no, she wasn't sane. The next morning, I woke up to something even more ridiculous than the parking sign she had drilled into my driveway. A lawsuit, or at least what Karen thought was a lawsuit. Karen tries and fails to take me to court. There, taped to my door in bold Comic Sans font, was a legal document titled Cease and Desist Order, issued by the Grand HOA Authority of this community. In the first paragraph, due to your ongoing and unlawful harassment of the HOA and its members, you are hereby ordered to cease and desist all hostile activities, including but not limited to owning an ugly car, disrespecting authority, committing multiple felonies against me. Oh, this was gold. I couldn't even be mad. Karen had gone full clown mode. That's when my lawyer cousin, Ben, came over for coffee. The moment he saw the cease and desist notice, he actually laughed so hard he had to sit down. "This isn't even legally binding," he wheezed, wiping away a tear. "Dude, she literally wrote this herself." I grinned. "So, what happens if I ignore it?" "Oh, absolutely nothing. I could work with that." The final blow. Since Karen wanted to play legal games, I figured I'd help her out. I made a few copies of her fake lawsuit and took them straight to the real HOA board. The new president, a super chill guy named Mark, took one look at it and shook his head. "All right, I've had enough of her." And that's when we checked the HOA's financial records. See, Karen had already been caught using HOA funds for personal purchases, but when we really dug into the numbers, oh boy. Turns out she had been skimming money off the books for years. Fake maintenance charges, overpriced community upgrades that never happened, even mystery payments to a consulting service that didn't exist. Karen wasn't just a nuisance, she was a fraud. Mark wasted no time. He reported the financial discrepancies to the city's housing authority. And because Karen had signed off on everything under her own name, she was personally responsible for the missing money. Within a week, Karen received a real legal notice, this time from the county. She was officially under investigation for HOA fraud. The final meltdown. When the news broke, Karen lost it. I was watering my lawn when I saw her outside, packing up her car like she was fleeing a crime scene. She saw me watching and snapped, "This is all your fault." I sipped my coffee. "Oh, how so?" "You ruined my life," she shrieked, throwing a box into her trunk. "I built this neighborhood. I made it perfect. And now. She was so mad, she didn't even finish her sentence. Instead, she got in her car, slammed the door, and sped off down the street. Where was she going? Straight to the police station. Why? Because she had a warrant out for her arrest. The city's fraud investigation had moved fast. And by the time Karen realized they were serious, it was too late. She thought she could clear things up by showing up at the station voluntarily. Instead, she was booked on the spot. The charges? Financial misconduct, fraudulent use of HOA funds, falsification of records. And just like that, Karen's reign of terror was officially over. Aftermath. With Karen gone, the neighborhood finally went back to normal. The ridiculous HOA rules? Gone. The fake parking restrictions? The stress of wondering when Karen would pop up with another bogus complaint? Also gone. And me? Oh, I was thriving. I parked my Mustang right in my driveway just because I could, And every now and then I'd sip my coffee and smile because nothing, and I mean nothing, was more satisfying than knowing Karen had tried everything to take me down and ended up taking down herself instead.